Work is finished in the office, so I'm out here again continuing to put my car back together. Last time I got the injectors in and torqued down, but I was waiting on a tool that I could use to help me fasten the unions, and this is what I've ordered. It's designed to operate off a socket, so you can use a torque wrench, but it will fit over the steel fuel lines and then still allow you to turn it. So it's basically like a crow's foot adapter, but for an end on where there's limited space. So that should allow me to get into here past that shroud and do up all of my injectors. There is a reference to the tightening torque for those unions in this here printed manual thing. That was the 8.8 for the injector to the head itself. But somewhere in here, if I can just find it. Right, yeah, that's the tool it said to buy. This isn't actually BMW's version, it's just an aftermarket part supplier. I think it was about 11 quid. That's fuel line removal. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, tighten down union nuts on the injectors to 23 Newton meters. So that's what I shall be doing. Set that to 23 newtons and have a bash. I've put the fuel rail back in position loosely. You can still wiggle it around. And then I've just done all of these up progressively finger tight, including this one. But before I actually torque them down, I'm going to put the mounting bolts back through for the fuel rail itself, because I can well imagine that if you nip up all the unions, the rail might not land in exactly the same place, and then you wouldn't be able to get those in. So I'm doing everything up loose, then I'll progressively tighten stuff up. I had a bit of a fail with the old tool here. That's half inch drive, is it? Whatever, it's not compatible with my mini torque wrench. All the torque wrenches I've got that are that size don't go down low enough in torque. So what I've done is I've nicked a plug socket thing that's for opening sumps on gearboxes and engines, and that just about fits in there. There's a bit of slop, but once it's actually engaged, it shouldn't make any difference to the torque values. What will make a difference to the torque values is the fact that that is offset. So really, I should probably go look up in a table or calculate the difference in torque I'll get for it being offset, but I really can't be bothered, so I'm just going to do it about 23 and be consistent. I'll probably hold it that way round and crank off that side, and then I'm getting at least a little bit more than 23 Newton meters. So the injectors are now all nicely torqued down. It's surprising how little 23 Newton meters is on a rod or a bar that long. I was a little bit puzzled myself because it didn't feel right, so I checked with the torque wrench some of the other unions that I hadn't disturbed, and with 23 Newton meters you could just crack them up a little bit more, so it's about right. It's just quite surprising how little that is. Now I'm just refitting all of the little low pressure bypass return lines. You push them on with that lever, and then just push the pop cap down, and they click shut, which is nice. So I don't envisage any problems with them, but there is the potential they could leak, but we'll worry about that later. If they do, then I'll just have to replace those tiny O-rings, but it's low pressure, so it shouldn't be bad. See, I'm really good to you guys. I'm putting deliberate mistakes in so that you get to see what not to do. Basically, I forgot to put that in before putting the injector rail on, so I've had to take the low pressure return hoses off again, the injector rail off again. I can put that back underneath and put it all back together again. So that's another 15 minutes wasted. Before I put the last of those back on, I've got good access to that area, so I'm going to fit my new crank breather. Now this is what I have been calling a vortex type filter, but I could be completely wrong on my terminology. Anyway, this I think is the later design, which is what I was expecting to find in mine. But if you watched the video the other day, I opened it up and found what I'm terming the bog roll or loo roll holder, which was just like a conventional round cotton filter thing. Well, it's probably not cotton, but you get the idea. So I'm going to put this one back in and hope that that will alleviate some of the breathing problems I've been having and maybe limit the amount of oil that comes up into the inlet. But, you know, we shall see. Don't really know. I'm still, you know, kind of concerned that all of this is being caused by a failing turbo seal. So I don't really want to pull the turbo at the moment, and I'm not going to pull the turbo. So I'll put it back together as is, and then if it goes again, I'll try and repair or replace the turbo from working underneath so I don't have to disturb the whole top end again. That's about all I'm going to be doing tonight. I'm still waiting on the swirl flap blanking plates, and the I have got the stuff to do the oil change and put the air filter in and stuff, but I'm going to leave that till right at the end when I've done everything else. Yeah, still waiting for the swirl, what are they called, swirl flap blanking plugs to come. Then I've got my inlet soaking in cleaning fluid. Once that's soaked a bit longer, I'll blast that off with a jet wash, and then I can put it all back together again and then try and get this thing started. I'm going to show you now why it's imperative I get this thing running, because using a police car as a daily is really pissing me off. So here we have the front of the police car. Driving to work today, a lorry pulled out and it flicked up a big stone, which took a big chunk out of my uber minty white paint, because that bonnet is flawless, but now it has that big flaw in it, so it's not so flawless. So yeah, that's why I want my BMW back on the road, because this thing should be being looked after nicely instead of thrashed around the M25 every day. So yeah, the sooner I get the BMW done on the road and this thing tucked away again, the better. Good news, my blanking plugs for the swirl flaps have arrived, as have the new gaskets, the seal rings for the bolts, and that is for the EGR and throttle body to the inlet. The inlet has been soaking in cleaning fluid for a couple of days, and then I've just blasted it out with a high pressure hose. So it's not crystal clean, but all of the loose debris is out. So I'm going to put those seals in there along with the blanking plugs, put the EGR and the throttle body back on, then get ready to put it in the car. Right, that's all back together again. Got a new seal in there. I've had to reuse the old one between here. I didn't really need to, but I did put a tiny smear of that Loctite 598 just around the O-rings on the swirl flap blanking plugs. Just because these aren't BMW parts, they're aftermarket, and if that's where it was leaking from before, I definitely don't want it to do it again. So I've just degreased it and then put a blob of that around there. Put the actuator back on, even though the swirl flap rod is not going to be connected, but apparently, I might have mentioned this in a previous video, the car likes to know that that sensor is there or that actuator is there. If it doesn't get it, if it doesn't get a signal back, then it can throw an error code. So I'm going to go out to the car and then see what else I need to do in terms of prep work before I can put that back on. There isn't really very much prep work to do in here before putting that on, other than remove all my wadding paper, clean up these gasket faces with petrol or brake cleaner again so those new O-rings seal. I've also done things like any electrical cables that need to be refastened or anything, the ones at the back as well, I'm just moving them well out of the way, knowing that where they are now so I can see them, and then where they're going to be when I've got that back on and can connect it all up nicely. I've got my tub of petrol which I've been using to clean bits, and these are the rubbers and metal guides that go through the inlet manifold and help clamp it down. And then these are the ones I thought I'd lost. They're the ones that go on those little pedestals. I think they actually get squidged into here first, and then those guides get pushed through the back side and lock into position. so that should stop them falling out. You know, I went to all that trouble trying to find the ones I thought I dropped in the engine, only to find nothing. I have just found another one down here, which I definitely didn't have before because I threw all the other ones away to stop me getting confused. So I think they must have just dropped and then rattled out, so that's quite reassuring. Well, that wasn't too difficult. I put those little sealing rubbers into the underside of the manifold and then pushed those metal guide pins with rubbers on, and that locked them all in place, so when I turned the manifold up they didn't all drop out. So then I just offered it up to the engine and dropped it down, paying care to get the studs actually through the centre of those holes, and it went on really nicely. So now I'm going to go around and do up all of the fastenings. They're all, according to this, 8 Newton meters. 5 Newton meters is for the clamp that goes on here, which I'll get to later on. That one for the EGR. The book doesn't actually tell you what order to do them up in, so I'm just gonna nip them all down hand tight first and then go along with the torque wrench afterwards, probably going inside to out just to make sure it pulls down nice and straight. That's all torqued down now. I nearly forgot to put that bracket back on, which holds that engine cover, and it was the one with the little white paint marking on it, or on my engine anyway, just a paint marking on the inlet so you know which stud it's off. So I've got to go fit all of the little pipes for engine vacuum. Let's fit the dipstick tube. That is for that, which is some kind of intake pressure sensor, I think. Then we've got the little hose down there and just general tidying up to do. Well, most of it's coming back together, but I am being fought all the way by this top cover for the air filter. BMW win the award for the dumbest design. Basically, I can't get it to sit comfortably so that I can get all of these bolts in. It just doesn't want to go down, and I don't know why, and it is really pissing me off now, because once upon a time air filters, just a few spring clips, change the element, put it back in, fine. This thing is complicated and it is a pain in the balls. Well, I had to stop for a minor rain delay. I think my phone is fogged up slightly as well. Got the new air filter in, the air filter cover done, and now I'm going to drop the oil, put a new oil filter in and refill it. Got the oil draining. Time to open the filter housing, for which I'm using a 32mm socket, which is a bit strange really. God knows why BMW needed to put such a big head on it. Quite annoying, especially when it comes to torquing it back up, because it gives you a torque value for it, but of course you would then need a torque wrench which takes that kind of size socket, which I don't have. So I'll be putting it back on with feel, as with cars I used to work on. I do like these Bosch filter kits, because as well as having a new O-ring to go round here, that's the old one that I just picked off with a screwdriver, you actually get a new sump plug washer as well, which is a nice touch. What they don't give you, or what wasn't in this one, is there's an O-ring there as well. I haven't replaced that because it wasn't in my kit, unless it fell out and I dropped it, but I don't think it was. So yeah, fit that back on here and then put it back in the car. That's done up nicely now. I didn't use a torque wrench, I basically did it up enough to compress that O-ring and then just to contact in a tiny bit more. We'll have 8 litres of engine oil, which I'm going to put in now. Well, not going to put all 8 in, I'm probably going to put about 7 in, which is a good start. Then I'll put it on the ground, because of course it's still up on axle stands at the moment, but I'll get most of that in, then I can put all the underbelly panel back on, the intercooler pipe, scuttle plastics, all the rest of it, and check the oil again and hopefully start it up. It's just starting to rain again and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to pack up now and I'm going to gamble. I'm going to go for broke, so I'm going to take the police car back to my dad's and leave it there and get the train to work tomorrow, and hopefully put all this back after work and drive home. That's my plan. But there's nothing like a bit of motivation, such as not being able to get home and having to sleep on the office sofa again like I did last week. So yeah, so tomorrow's the day, put it all back together, final top up with oil, run it, and hopefully it doesn't piss oil everywhere. Apologies if this is repetition. I really can't remember where I got up to filming yesterday because I'm doing this bits and pieces after work. Most of it's back together, still got to fit that intercooler pipe, the bottom panel, all the scuttle stuff and the engine cover. Down here is that wiring bracket that I broke the mountings for, which I then couldn't buy as an independent part from BMW. So it's fairly secure actually. When you actually slide it onto its clips, it just sits there. So in future I'll probably just pop a self-tapping screw through, which is a bodge, but as I said, part's not available and I can't fix it, so I'd rather it was secure than drop down onto the turbo and melt. So I'm just going to continue putting the final bits in, drop it on the floor, top up the oil, and hopefully drive home tonight. Right, bit of head scratching. Just refitted the intercooler pipe, but I can't be sure which way round the spring-loaded gates went. The two ends are different. One is very worn. I think I've got them the right way around, but basically they're not exactly inspiring confidence in the way that they lock into the grooves here. So just a note, be careful when you take yours apart, make sure you get the gates the right way round and have a good look at how they work, because I'm not convinced mine are great. If they're not, they'll blow off with boost and I'll just have to put them back on the other way around. Right, car is on the ground. I've put enough oil in it to get mid-level on the dipstick. That will drop obviously once it's started up and filled that oil filter housing. So I'm going to reconnect the battery now and try and start it and see what comes up on the dash in terms of errors and things. Annoyingly, the boot is locked and it's electrically operated, so I can't open it without climbing back through into the battery compartment to reconnect that, and then I should be able to open it. Going for first start. It'll crank for a while before it actually fires those injectors. It should be self-bleeding, we shall see. Damn it. Well, I just kept cranking and it fired up, so it sounded a bit rough to start with. Sounds alright. Let's see how much smoke it kicks out. None yet, but that's not a clear indicator because it took a while the other day before it started producing plumes and plumes of white smoke. Well, I'm calling that the beginnings of a success. Drove about 50 miles last night. Not a drop has come out the bottom. So even if the turbo seal is leaking, I've prevented oil getting out of the engine bay, which is great. I didn't put the underbelly panels back on, which was a bit of a fail, because driving around the M25, the underbelly panel on one side, or the remains of it, from the mid section of the floor dropped down. So I have to drive pretty slow so it doesn't happen again. But fingers crossed, that is the oil leak solved for the moment.